5 drones. 2 minutes. A nuclear deterrent on the line. Russia sends Orlan 10s 200 feet above the Atlantic at 80 knots to map France's SSBN pens, tube by tube, patrol by patrol. They're AI programmed, riding sea clutter to dodge radar. But they're seen, thermal cameras at 15 kilometers. And then the board flips. A US Poseidon fires off a GPS mirage that makes the drones think home base moved. They turn 180 degrees in roughly 120 seconds. You'll see how a false sky beat a real threat, and why restraint can be a weapon. Before we move on, I'd like to ask you a small favor. If you appreciate this content, please take a second to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Over 98% of you watch the videos without subscribing. It costs you nothing, but it makes a huge difference to us. So, did you click the subscribe button? Great. Thank you so much. Now, back to the video. They flew at 200 feet and 80 knots for a reason. That band is a blind seam in NATO's look-down picture. At that height, the Earth curves the radar beam away. At that speed, the airframe stays stable and the cameras don't blur. You get clean frames, solid mapping, and you're still slow enough to ride the troughs. If you go faster, you throw a bigger wake in radar and IR. Go higher, and you pop over the horizon into the big scopes. The sweet spot is low enough to vanish, slow enough to see. The target was simple and hard at the same time. France's SSBN pens at Aulon. Fixed concrete, known berths, fixed cranes. The Russians needed the fine print, not the headline. They wanted tube mouth locations along each hull so they could tag where maintenance happens. They wanted crane swing paths to understand where lift points land and how often. They wanted patrol cycles at the pier, the rhythm of guards, and the handoff windows. They wanted the geometry of each berth, angles, clearances, and the gap between quay wall and sail, so a future sensor or munition could be plotted to the inch. Long-range radar looks outward for big targets. It stares at the sky, not the foam. These drones hit underneath, inside the radar horizon, where sea clutter masks anything small. Their run was preset. No pilot voice, no uplink chatter. AI held the line and let the airframe do the work, which means there was nothing to triangulate except a quiet motor and a thin heat trail. That is gray zone tradecraft. You move through gaps, not against walls. Sea clutter is the ocean static. Waves throw back a mess of returns that look like a noisy TV. When a drone sits low, its radar echo folds into that noise. The white caps and spray become a kind of camouflage. Surface search radars can burn through some of it, but the smaller and slower you are, the more the water hides you. If you've ever tried to spot a small boat in a storm from a distance, that's the idea. The background eats the foreground. They flew with logic you could sketch on a napkin. Staggered spacing so one track didn't amplify another. Offset bearings to keep the formation from looking like a neat line on any sensor sweep. Short glide segments to cut prop noise and drop the RF footprint of onboard systems. They traded speed for signature, carving a path that favored survival over schedule. Every leg placed them behind terrain or under a lobe of clutter, then popped them into a clear slice for a quick scan of a pier line or crane base. But the counter didn't look for shape or sound. A French anti-drone team scanned on thermal and caught a hot speck at 15 kilometers. Heat beats horizon games. An engine glows against cold sea air. A watchstander locked the first signature, then saw for more brighten. Heads turned to the ESM rack to cross-cue. Speed and altitude matched a low, slow profile. That gave the defenders a track, a timing, and a stack of options without breaking silence. The Orlan 10 fits this role because it's cheap, light, and flexible. It carries modular sensors and flies steady at low speed. That makes it a good mapper of fixed infrastructure. It doesn't need to be fast. It needs to hold a lane and build a grid of images and angles. For a probe, that's enough. So the stealthy ingress ran into a passive wall. Thermal eyes pierced the gray zone and held the formation short of the pens. The cameras saw them, and no missiles left the rails. The next move lived in the sky's software layer, where signals bend flight paths without a single flame. What makes a drone quit mid-run without a shot? You change what it believes. Not the map in its memory, the sky it reads. When you own the sky's story, an attack folds itself and walks away. NATO built that outcome in layers. First, the network went quiet and listened. Passive ESM picked up weak emissions around the bay, motor harmonics, tiny timing leaks, the nervous system of a low-slow formation. Those prints handed the problem to a USP-8A Poseidon orbiting high, a flying node built to hunt signals, sort them, and then act without tipping into a missile fight. But then an extra piece entered the board. High altitude, long endurance. It lit off a white noise blanket meant to smear the picture for both the French team and the Poseidon. White noise jamming is brute force. Flood the band so every useful tone disappears. If it worked, the spoof dies in the cradle. If it doesn't, you only told the defenders where you are and what you can do. The spoof did not need the whole band. It needed the trust link. A crafted GPS field went live, tighter in time than the cheap receivers on the Orlons and louder than the satellites they thought they heard. In that false field, home shifted miles into open water. The autopilot held its faith in the sky and repointed the nose. No argument. No human in the loop. Here's the simple mechanic. The drone has two truths, stored waypoints and live space math. When those disagree, the live math wins. The map didn't move. The sky did. The brain follows the sky. So it turns to go home, even when home is a ghost out past the shelf. At exactly 2 minutes, the formation showed it. One bank, then another, each airframe rolling through a clean 180 and pulling away from the pins. No debris, no splash, just 5 dots sliding back into gray air, quiet as a fishing trip that got cut short. That is what restraint looks like when it has teeth. The jamming node tried to hold the curtain. It shoved more noise, broader and hotter. The Poseidon answered with a narrow tool. A directed microwave pulse slammed the third drone's comms at close range. No blast. No shrapnel. Systems went dumb. Control links died. It turned into ballast and met cold Atlantic water without a headline. For a beat, the jammer's roar ruled the spectrum. Then it faltered. Power dips betrayed distance, antenna quality, and aim errors. Those wobbles were tells. The high-alt asset lost its grip, and the rest of the play rolled on. You watched a bully swing wide and miss. Meanwhile, the electronic picture got richer. Each Orlon, now obedient to the mirage, kept sending routine status blips. You can trace those like an umbilical. Angle of arrival shifts with every wing wag. With enough slices, you get a bearing fan that narrows down the source and the support architecture around it. You don't have to shoot to learn. That became the mini payoff. NATO neutralized the air thread with lies instead of lead. They logged signatures, modes, and timing. They kept escalation on a leash while turning a probe into a live lab. With the sky game settled, the surface piece tightened. Patrol craft lit up with coded signals and steady language, weaving a mapped kill web around the approaches. The message was simple. We set the pace, and you answer to it. In the gray zone, the side that shapes the data shapes the fight. NATO used restraint as a weapon, not to step back, but to turn a live probe into an intelligence harvest. They set tempo, wrote the narrative, and kept escalation on a leash. That's real control. If you want more breakdowns of how signals, sensors, and timing decide modern battles, hit the subscribe button. Comment your choice below. Would you have pulled the trigger or run the spoof? The lesson stands. Control the sky's story, and you control the ground beneath it. The next fight starts in the spectrum, long before anyone fires.